We are just about to begin this side event jointly organized by IGS, TERI and UTM. May I request if everybody, if you can come a little bit closer, that would be nicer. Now I request Mr. Takeuchi, President IGS, to begin the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, friends. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the UNFCCC official side event on the theme, How can Asia achieve a net zero future? Building coalitions for transformative change. The side event is jointly organized by the Institute for Global Environment Strategies, IGS, Japan, the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI, in India, and the University of Technology, Malaysia, UTM. Let me begin with an important statement of fact. A healthy planet and people depends on a net zero Asia. Countries in Asia have devised a strategy that could make some progress toward that goal. However, legitimate questions exist about the ambition and the implementation of those strategies. In my view, these gaps are particularly related to limitations on the way we think about the climate problem. At IGES, we are aware that a more expansive outside-the-box thinking that recognizes interlinkages across climate, biodiversity, and sustainable consumption is needed to make progress on net zero goals. A related shift is the need for the multi-stakeholder collaborations that can translate more integrated thinking into action to address the previously mentioned ambition and implementation gaps. This leads me to another enabler of change, socio-technical transitions. Indeed, we need to think about the technology not in isolation but in interplay between society and technology. Hence, the session will showcase discussion on new modes of socio-technological collaboration, such as technology co-innovation. IGES and TERI have been working on this concept to help adapt and scale socio-technological changes in various contexts. Friends, this side event will highlight the need for building coalitions among governments at national, subnational, city to city, as well as the industry and civil society to achieve a net zero Asia. My sincere appreciation to our partner institution, TERI and UTM, and the colleagues who tirelessly worked for organizing this event. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Takeuchi, and once again, very warm welcome to all of you to this session, which is jointly organized by TERI, IGS, and UTM. I fully endorse what the chair has said. I'll just make four quick remarks before we invite the panelists here. One is the issue of transition globally and in South Asia. What is the kind of transition we are looking for? First is the area of energy transition. Naturally, that is the first choice. But in the case of energy transition, our experience is that it is mostly a question of mobilizing the right kind of finance. Finance at the right scale and in the right manner, so that technologies are available so that the goals can be achieved. But the second and more equally critical for net zero transition is the area of industries, which is going to be achieved in the long term, not in the short term. And there we need both finance as well as technological intervention. So what kind of interventions are required and what is the kind of collaboration that we can think of That will be a question which I think our panelists should refer to. Third is the non-energy sectors, it includes sectors where it is not just the energy consumption, where social and economic transformations are involved, to which Mr. Takeuchi has referred, socio-technical questions. So social and economic dimensions of this transition, which are those areas which we need to cover. And to my mind, the climate resilience of the infrastructure is an area which immediately comes to my mind, and the justness or the social inclusivity of this transition process. People should not be left out in this process. That is the third question. And lastly, what kind of collaborations do we have at the moment? What is the kind of change which we need in those collaborations or joint activities? TERI and IGS are partners in academic research, and such advocacies, but there are other examples of collaboration available. In my own country, I can cite the example of International Solar Alliance. We have a coalition on disaster risk resilience. Recently, Government of India had launched an initiative for the small island countries, which is infrastructure for resilient infrastructure for small island countries. So there are examples of such collaborations and alliances and regional initiatives, but we can certainly plan newer ones in the light of the challenges that we have before us for net zero transition. And last but not the least, how can we involve the markets in this collaborative exercise? We certainly do want carbon markets to play a role in the investments as well as raising the ambition. So can our governments and different players in the society come together to help us in making this transition? So these were the four questions which I thought I will touch upon before I request the chair requests the panelists to address.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to move to the presentations. First, I would like to introduce two researchers from IGS. First, I would like to ask Mr. Kentaro Tamura, Director, Planet and Energy Division of IGS, to deliver his presentation.
Okay, can you hear me? No. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Kentaro Tamura. Thank you for joining our side event. First, I'd like to briefly talk about the shaping policy toward net zero. So first, I'd like to show this figure. This figure, as you can see, the many Asian countries have carbon neutral or net zero goal already. Which includes not only big countries like India, China, but also small countries like Cambodia and Sri Lanka or Nepal. And also some of them maybe just pledge, but others formulated long-term strategy, which was requested by Glasgow Climate Pact. But the formulation of the long-term strategy is one thing, but implementation is other thing. So next, I'd like to briefly discuss what is the point, 3 points, which we have to think about when we implement our long-term strategies. The first one is we need implementation roadmap. So many long-term strategies have a vision or tentative timeline and also some kind of a scenario for the future. But it is critically important to translate this into the specific roadmap, which specify what are necessary by when, and what are not should be avoided to avoid locking by when. That kind of thing is necessary, and then have incorporated them in the individual sector-specific policies. So by doing so, we can provide long-term policy signal to the stakeholder. So this is one thing. The other things is we need to lay the foundation for smooth and comprehensive transformation. So this long-term strategy is not only about mitigation, or adaptation, or climate policy in a narrow sense, but it is a long-term sustainable development plan. So it is critically important to mobilize developmental policy, industrial policy, or even labor or social security policy to make it sure this transition should be smooth. So by doing so, again, we can provide a kind of sound investment environment. So this is another critical importance for moving forward. And thirdly, we need just transition. The speed of change is critical to addressing climate change, but also the quality of a change is critical. So we should take into account that those who are negatively affected by this transition. So that's a third thing. So for the moment, I will make some general remarks. So I'd like to conclude my presentation with some specific cases of Vietnam. Because there is one kind of perspective that Asian economies are rapidly growing, so energy and electric demand also growing. So renewable energy is not enough, so they need to continuously use fossil fuel to meet such kind of demand. But case of Vietnam show that is not necessarily the case. So this figure shows power generation by source in Vietnam. As you can see, that power generation continuously grow. But as you can see, the power generation by fossil fuel already peaked in 2019. On the other hand, the soaring power demand has been met by increase in solar generation, solar power generation. This is thanks to the kind of attractive feed-in tariff scheme. So, but there are still some challenges remain to sustain and facilitate this trend. First, even though the solar power rapidly grows, but still there are some needs for make more balanced renewable energy development, particularly development of the power wind, and also grid connection is another issue. And also interestingly, so far this rapid growth in the solar power in Vietnam were mainly financed by domestic capital. So far, they do not have enough attractive international finance yet. So we need some robust policy framework to attract international finance as well. So also, of course, and also we need to they need to some improvement in the domestic capacity for related technology as well. And also, finally, to accelerate earlier retirement of thermal power plant, particularly coal power plant, we need kind of broad policy package like just energy transition platform, JTP, and also ADB's energy transition mechanism. They can be carefully designed to take into account not only this climate mitigation, but also other social dimension. So by doing so, I think that we can provide policy basis which allow Vietnam to sustain and enhance their energy transition. Okay, that is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tamura-san, for highlighting the challenges and opportunities in Asia, particularly by taking an example of the cases in Vietnam. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move to the next speaker, whose name is Mr. Nanda Kumar, who is the research manager and senior researcher, Climate Analysis Division of IGES. So, Kumar is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. We are extremely sorry to have this so much of noise around us, but I'll try to be a bit more louder so that all of you can listen. Thank you, the panelists and the chairs, and also all those who have gathered here to listen to us. Now, my presentation is in that I'm trying to highlight an alternative mechanism to conventional technology transfer. So this is the core of my presentation today. As the previous speakers have already highlighted, to move towards the net zero target, technology will play a core role. But one of the major concerns is that while this advanced technology has a sort of a very critical role, can we still depend on technology transfer to ensure that developing countries also have access to clean technologies? And in the conventional technology transfer mechanism, what we found is that the technology, advanced technology, not technology per se, but advanced technology-based equipment and machineries are sold to developing countries on a reduced or a subsidized cost. Now, these are actually not really technology transfer, but these have been called technology transfer for a long time. Now, it's time for us to really rethink whether such a mechanism can help us or can help developing countries to accelerate to net zero goals, because there is not much time for all these debates. It's time to move to the real action. And at IGS, we have been working on this concept called co-innovation. And the co-innovation is unlike this traditional technology transfer, which is sort of unilateral, which is from one-sided, like from developed country to developing country. We find that such equipment and technology-based products that are moved from developed country to developing country often find several challenges in adjusting or to sort of acclimatizing to the host countries. So there is there's a serious gap in ensuring in meeting this expected targets. So instead of this one-sided transfer of technology that we have been depending on for a long time, we could think of jointly developing technologies by the source countries, those are technologically rich countries, and the recipient countries, which have been host countries. And we will think that, why should we go for such a mechanism, because it is the developed countries will lose their market. No, here the case is that when an advanced technology is being developed with the participation or with the contribution from developing country, the end product can be more suitable to a developing country environment. The reason is that by co-designing or co-developing this technology, you will ensure that you have an end product that is sustainable and cost-effective and also suitable for the local environment. So we find that the mechanism of co-innovation has a lot of potential to develop net zero or low carbon technologies, especially in the net zero context. So this is some concept which we have been working, and we also had worked with Terry on this research. And we at IGS, we have also been supporting different organizations, and UNEP Nairobi has an innovation facility. For that, we have been consulted by them on this co-innovation concept. Now, there are several examples why co-innovation is advantageous and also can be helpful. So I have actually cited some of those examples here. Maybe one of the best examples I wanted to cite here is that Takakura composting, which is a composting method developed by Japan. And with the support of JICA, the Sakakura composting method has been taken to Indonesia. But initially when this method and technology was taken to Indonesia, it appeared very costly for the local context. And by sourcing the local materials for developing the equipment and machinery, and also sort of incorporating local learnings into this product development, this particular method is become very popular in Indonesia. And similarly, you have, I've also cited some other examples here. One is that a Next Charge, which is a battery charging product. This is jointly done by Exide, which is India's one of the largest battery manufacturers in India, and Lensche, which is a Swiss company. So they are trying to develop efficient lithium-ion batteries. And we also have some examples of Mitsubishi and Mahindra collaborating to manufacture electricity-based tractors, which can be used for small farmers. And the other example which I have showed here is that a company called Ola, which is operating in India, which is a car service company, and they have been manufacturing electric vehicles. And they also have a large innovation facility where they are incorporating inputs from multiple players to ensure that they are able to bring out efficient electric vehicles, which are four-wheelers as well as scooters. So a mechanism of incorporating knowledge from multiple stakeholders can be an advantageous method rather than depending on traditional technology transfer mechanism. That's all my presentation, and I'll be happy to hear from you if you have any suggestions or questions at the end. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Nanda, for your explanation about the technology transfer towards net zero, highlighting the importance of the concept of co-innovation between the developing countries. So thank you very much. I would like to pass the microphone to my co-chair for the next two presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Takeuchi. The next speaker, which I am going to invite, is Mr. Manish Kumar Shrivastava. He is a senior fellow of the Earth Sciences and Climate Change at TERI, and I am going to request him to speak on the issue of technology co-innovation, which Kumar talked about, co-innovation, co-development of technologies, so that we can achieve transformation and this net zero transition.
Thank you, Mr. Rashmi. I will be brief and build on where Nanda Kumar left. So yes, innovation and co-learning, co-innovation is the starting point for new technologies always. But what we have found in a study that we have just completed as part of a project called Strengthening National Practices for Financing Low Carbon Transition in countries. So we looked at financial instruments for technology adoption in the MSME sector. So we find that there are, even when the technologies are available and they are cost effective, there are still very complex set of barriers. They are, of course, the standard barriers are listed always: access to finance, lack of capacity, and so on and so forth. But what we, through the stakeholder consultation, engagement with industry and the institutions that work with industry and trying to persuade them to adopt the available technologies, something very interesting came out. That, right, you identify barriers, but you don't need to always necessarily address each barrier independently. You can be innovative and support technology transfer, or those of you who are familiar with the S-curve, that, you know, getting out of the valley of death, the financing needs to be a little bit more innovative than what we have known so far. So I just want to make 2 points there. One is that you need to look at the supply chain. So in the smaller players, all the capacity gaps, access issues, if you allow or if you make space to governance innovations and financial support such that the large companies in the supply chain, they can take the burden or the burden is transferred on them to make sure that the smaller industries in their supply chain, they adopt these better technologies, then it could be really very useful because they are already linked with each other with commercial interest. So if large companies see a commercial interest or regulatory compliance pressure, then they would work with their smaller players in supply chain, and because they are linked in business terms, it would make more easy because the trust and confidence is already there and you don't feel that this is going to cause us loss. The second thing I think is even more important. Many of the financial institutions who are particularly the SIDBI, they noted that, well, there have been funds created to support SMEs, but still there is apprehension, doubt. And our own experience at Terry working with the MSME sector in foundries has taught us that with smaller players who lack knowledge, capacity, information, hand-holding is important. You have to invest a lot of time talking to them, working with them. So even if the technology makes a commercial sense, it has to make more of a lived experience kind of sense. And this is the transaction cost of convincing, working with them for longer period is never accounted in the discourse on finance. So the financial institutions would only look at the balance sheet impact of a technology. Changing technology A to technology B, how would it affect the balance sheet, whether it would make financial sense or not. But before that, the cost of convincing, that is never accounted for. Who will pay for the cost of convincing? I think if we think about these two aspects, we would necessarily need to not only think about co-innovation for technology, but also co-innovation on climate finance. What kind of finance, for what purpose finance is to be provided for, demanded for. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish, for highlighting the importance of innovative financing, which covers not just the incremental cost but also the cost of transaction, particularly in the small and medium industries. Let me now invite Mr. Kumar Gaurav, who is Senior Advisor looking after climate change and circular economy at the GIZ in India. He will speak about he's free to speak about the issues which he thinks are important, but if we can touch upon the hard to abate sectors where technology will have to play a very important role.
Thank you, Chair. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kumar Gaurav, and as part of a European Union and German government funded project, we were asked to prepare 4 reports. These are input reports to the development of roadmaps for hard to abate sectors. And the sectors that were chosen by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change included cement, iron and steel, fertilizer, ammonia, and petrochemical sector. So it was a very long consultative process that we adopted for preparing these input reports. And we partnered with Terry. We had Deloitte as our consultants, as well as the leadership group on industry transition, which is led by India and Sweden. They have their secretariat at Stockholm Environmental Institute. They were also partners for 2 of the sectors, particularly cement and iron and steel. So I'll just briefly talk about what has been our experience and how we approached this issue. We don't have findings approved yet, so I cannot present anything. how we started is that we did a lot of secondary desk-based research of whatever is available in terms of published literature on these sectors. What are the current level of emissions? What are the current technologies? And that study was used to consult industry people as well as technology suppliers through an interview and focus group discussion approach. So what happened is that in terms of publicly available information, there were some gaps which were filled by the inputs provided by the plant operators or the companies themselves, and sometimes even the technology suppliers. And then the report was further revised, and we had consultations for each of the sectors separately, where we invited all stakeholders and asked them about different scenarios and possibilities of how emissions will be reduced. What was helpful in our case was that we have a net zero target for the country. So you know that whichever sector it is, whatever the current situation is, it has to reach net zero by 2070. And then in terms of technologies, all of these sectors had very long list of technologies, some 19 technologies, 25 technologies, and that was even after categorizing. So we would categorize a bunch of energy efficiency technologies in one group, certain process changes technologies in another group. And what we found is that there is this approach of technology readiness levels, TRLs. And in terms of these technology readiness levels, we found that the existing ready technologies, we call them TRL 9, like the renewable energy technology, the energy efficiency technology, process improvements, fuel substitution, which are currently available in the market. They sometimes make financial sense, but still they are not implemented, because as a company they don't have, like right now there are not any mandates to switch processes or deploy certain level of renewable energy. So even though these technologies are financially viable, there is a need for slight push or certain policy changes so that these technologies get implemented. And after deployment of these ready and market available technologies, there will still be a gap which has to be filled by these technologies that are not yet ready. They are the TRL 1 to 4 or 5 or sometimes even 7 level of technologies. And for those technologies, either the technology is under development, or even if it is available, you need a carbon price or some kind of a grant to make those projects viable. And in certain cases, for instance, example of carbon capture, utilization and storage, you need a very high carbon price, around $100, to make any of those projects viable. And although companies, some of the front runners, they are already exploring feasibility studies or detailed report preparation, and we were also approached for support. But the challenge is that even for a detailed project report, you need probably 500,000 euros, or it's really expensive to even explore and study in depth these technologies. So, and this is where the challenge lies. The other part of the analysis that we did is that what will be the cost implication in terms of financing required for these technologies, and if at all that financing is deployed and a certain carbon price is available, what will be the impact on the price of the product. For instance, these are all critical products, cement, steel, fertilizers, petrochemicals, and if you deploy a certain technology and the cost is loaded on the product cost, then for instance, some products will become twice more expensive, and as an economy, can we afford that level of price increase? So that is where we have submitted the findings that are our findings. There could be uncertainties in the values of cost required for a certain technology, the information that has been made available to us by technology suppliers and companies. But in what we found is that there is a strong willingness from the companies, and these are both private sector companies as well as public sector companies, to explore and decide through a cost benefit analysis, I would say, that what they can deploy in the coming years. And in certain cases, the industry has very basic kind of requests that can really accelerate the deployment of a certain technology. I'll give you an example, which is a very simple example of waste heat recovery boilers. So if you implement a waste heat recovery boiler, you generate electricity and it has a certain payback period. The low temperature waste heat recovery boilers are expensive and companies are not willing to deploy it at the current stage. But what they suggested, or what is the request to the government, is that if the electricity generated by the waste heat recovery boiler can be considered as renewable electricity, then they can use that electricity purchase as a renewable purchase obligation requirement, and that will make it viable. So we have a renewable purchase obligation requirement to all across companies and electricity consumers. So just by one policy change, that okay, if you are recovering waste heat and you are using it for electricity generation, the electricity that is generated can be considered renewable. You can have a massive change in the deployment of that particular technology. Similarly, for clinker substitution, we have a certain standard of how much fly ash can be added in the cement clinkers, and the companies are of the opinion that the standard is very strict. The levels that are allowed, they are very low, and companies can do better. So they can have 10% more substitution, and it just needs change in the standard by the Bureau of Indian Standards, and they can do their testing. They can see whether it is safe after certain level of increased mixing of fly ash, and then they can allow it, and that leads to a certain level of emission reduction. Then in case of iron and steel, also this scrappage policy, which has already happened in India. So in India, particularly in the larger cities, if you have a car which is more than 10 years old and it's a diesel car, after 10 years you have to scrap that car. For the petrol car, it is 15 years. And what it is leading to is that people earlier used to run a car for 25 years, they'll just repair it and keep running the car. Now it is not possible. You take it out on the road and you will be caught by the traffic police, they'll take your car. So now you have a certain level of assurance that so many cars are going to get scrapped, and that's the level of scrap that is going to be available. And scrap to steel is less GHG intensive than the other. So these are just some of the examples that we found out, and the study may be published early next year. But what we have found is that this consultative process of developing roadmaps is really helpful in getting very good insights and coming up with a certain way forward for the short term, medium term, and long term. So I'd like to close here. Thanks for your patient listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay, for informing us about the key findings from your study about how we can mitigate emissions in some of the key sectors of industry, and what policy changes or changes in the rules or market signals are required. With this, we have come to the end of the this session one, first part of this discussion, and we will now have open session two. So I request the speakers who have already spoken to step down, and we'll now invite the next round of speakers. Satoshi Watanabe, Ishii Naoko, the University of Tokyo, Chau, Loon, Mr. Kato, Makoto, Leslie Mitchell, and Meredydd. Kindly come on stage, please.
Yes, Satoshi Watanabe, Minister of Environment Japan, will come later, but I'd like to ask Dr. Naoko Ishii to open the... Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, sorry.
All right, very good afternoon to everyone. So let's get started the session too. So first, my name is Naoko Ishii, and first I would like to invite opening remarks by two chairs, two co-chairs, then Satoshi Watanabe, and also we will have a video recording the voice from Malaysia, then Muhammad Ali. So let me just first ask that then Satoshi Watanabe to provide your opening remarks. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Satoshi Watanabe, Deputy Director, Ministry of the Environment, Japan. First of all, I would like to thank our organizer for organizing this event. Institute for Global Environmental Strategy (IGES), the Energy and Resources Institute (PERI), and the University of Technology, Malaysia. Thank you very much. I would like to say a few words on behalf of our ministry. Last year, negotiations came to an agreement on the implementation rules of the Paris Agreement. It was a quite important year as the world moved from the negotiations to the implementation phase towards decarbonization. So in addition, let me talk about the Japanese measures. In addition to domestic actions towards the national targets to realize carbon neutrality by 2050, Japan would like to take global actions towards decarbonized and resilient Asia, together with partner countries. In the area of climate change, at the ASEAN-Japan Summit meeting held last year, Japan put forward the ASEAN-Japan Climate Change Action Agenda 2.0. Under these three pillars of transparency, mitigation, and adaptations, the government of Japan has significantly expanded its support to ASEAN member states. In addition to the inclusive cooperation package between Japan and ASEAN, Japan is promoting cooperation action with partner countries in Asia, like through partnership to strengthen transparency for innovation. It is called PASTI, which will be introduced other speakers. And joint credit mechanism, it is called JCM, and city-to-city collaboration program, and so on. And today, it is grateful to inform you that we launched the new partnership, the Paris Agreement Article 6 Implementation Partnership. The partnership will provide venues and opportunities to all interested countries and institutions to discuss about Article 6 market mechanism of capacity building. So if you are interested in the partnership, please contact our ministry's staff. Finally, I'm so regrettable that I have to go out this room immediately due to the another negotiation meeting. But I hope that today's discussion will lead to further discussions to realize a sustainable and decarbonized society in Asia. So Japanese government is looking forward to working with you further. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Watanabe-san. Now, I wonder, yeah, I'd like to call on the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Muhammad Ali of the University of Technology, Malaysia. Is this on call? Oh, it's a pre-recorded. Okay. Thank you.
Not playing. Should I start again, maybe?
Yes, maybe we can close it.
Yep.
Where we can get it.
I think it's in the folder. Start it again. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We tested this before, so I'm not sure what happened. In the interest of time, I think we have no choice but to probably forego this. Sorry about that. Okay.
All right, we have this technological hiccup, but let's get continue. So before I present the four presentations from our distinguished panel, I just want to say a few words about the framing of this session. So. I think all of us in this room know that climate war will be either won or lost in Asia. And the role of technology is so important, that we all know. At the same time, we also know how difficult it is to really transfer the technology and bring that in the society around it. So that is a challenge we are facing. So before I address that issue, I just want to present one framework which my Center for Global Commons at U Tokyo use quite a lot. So this is a more like what is really needed to transfer or transform the economic system, economic and social system to achieve the net zero, but also about sustainable development within the planetary boundaries. We call it global commons, by the way. So that we think about this 4x4 matrix. So what kind of economic system needs to be transformed? That is that horizontal the column. So the one we all know, energy transition, but we also know the cities, role of cities are extremely important. So how to transform the city system, that's second. The third thing, which is it's also maybe today's conversation, how to bring the circularity into the system. So how to make the production consumption more sustainable, that's the third pillar. The fourth pillar is actually the food. To me, that's my favorite topic. It's still buried in the system, but how to make the food more sustainable is extremely key. You will be surprised how much harm current food system is actually creating the pressure on the earth. So those four systems needs to be transformed. Question is how we can ignite those transformations. Then we identify the four action levers. First one is it's actually governance, and how to make our institution fit to the challenge. The second one is more like an economics and the metrics and the finance incentives. Maybe we talk about carbon pricing, but it's not just on the carbon pricing, all other mechanisms like finance, how we can bring those economic setup to accelerate the transformation. The third pillar already mentioned by previous speakers. Whatever we do, it needs to be just. Otherwise, all transformation is not sustainable. So how to bring the just element into this transformation? The last one is maybe today's conversation, innovation and technology, data innovation. But from this 4x4 matrix, it's extremely clear that the innovation on its own will not transform the society or economy. We have to think about this, and innovation is one lever, but it needs to be brought by other three action levers, and then how to transform the 4 key economic systems. So this is a bit of gigantic or gigantic kind of framing. The people feel quite overwhelmed, but I think it's important for us to share this kind of picture, the framework, so that we can first zoom out, then see the comprehensive picture, then you can zoom into your own space, where you are, but then what you can do within this 4x4. But using this zoom in, zoom out, you will be maybe very effective to think about transformation. So that is one slide I just want to share. And then going back to this today's panel session too, I think this is a very challenging panel, because the innovation itself, how to transfer innovation, is already very difficult, as mentioned by previous speakers. When I was at the GEF, my headache is this technology transfer center. I mean, most of the technologies are at the private sector. How this small amount of public money can really help technology transfer? It's just a nightmare. It may be dream, but it's also nightmare. So we really need to think about the new mechanisms. So from that point of view, I very much agree on the fact that Narendra Kumar actually that provide or propose that we need to break this conventional thinking, and we need to come up with a new mechanism. And then that what are those new mechanisms? Then maybe going back to this 4x4, we need to think about how to bring other threads together. Then I think that Tamura-san also provide a very good example of the Vietnam. Well, it's not just the Vietnam, but then last year at Glasgow, there are two very interesting initiatives actually launched. One is this Asian by ADB, Energy Transition Mechanism, and another one is South Africa initiative. Both of them try to do the same thing, not just to think about energy transition, but to build it along the government development plan and development strategy, and bring all other aspects of the just transition, the workers reskilling, social safety net, but also what that country can live in, say, 20 years from now. What is the competitiveness they are thinking of? So it's really a part of country's development strategy, and by bringing it, it's much easier for private sector really coming and helping to do their part. Just about this Vietnam, or actually in this case Indonesia, the ceremonially came at last year at Glasgow. She made it extremely clear. Early transition mechanism. ETM is a great thing, but it is really a long-term structural, industrial structure development strategy, and it needs to be bought by actually the entire population of Indonesia. I think that is the idea. Then I just want to mention that this year, what happened last week, we published, actually, Roderick Stern published that a paper, Finance for Climate, and I'm a part of his drafting team. In that paper, the paper actually proposed we need not 100 billion, we need 1 trillion per year, only for developing emerging countries, excluding China, and because we need a big push of the investment. But where that money comes from, it really should come from MDB, the bilateral financial development institution, but also mobilized by other private banks. Then the philanthropy can do a good big thing. So it's really a new kind of blended mechanism, but the core of this new mobilization is actually a very credible country platform. Maybe within that there is a sectoral approach. So all in all, what I'm trying to say is that
this fragmented approach is over. And it doesn't really shift the market. It doesn't really shift the direction. We really have to come up with a more comprehensive needle, that how to shift the needle, that how to shift the market through several important instruments. So that is my question and the presentation, the few was, and I would like to ask each of the panelists to think about zoom in, zoom out, and what is your part in this big picture, how to shift the market, that bringing your expertise or your knowledge and bringing others to help the country. So that is our job. So let's do this jigsaw puzzle together. So let us do it. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to invite Chau. Okay, you are someone. So do your part, please. Zoom in, zoom out.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here to share with you our experiences in building coalitions and partnerships for accelerating city and regional level transition into net zero emission in the case of Malaysia. Along the way, hopefully we'll be able to address some of the questions raised as well as framework mentioned earlier. We actually subscribe to what we believe in science to action in making low carbon society a reality. And in this, we believe that good climate policy must be based on good science and good evidence. And that good policies need to be crafted from the very beginning with implementation in mind, so that the policies will be put into real action on the ground in the city. And the example shown here is just some results from the Asia-Pacific integrated model that we use to provide us with a scientific basis to help us craft policies for city level. And we have been working with 18 cities for the past 10 years in Malaysia, and there is no time to go through each of those cities, but probably here, please allow me to highlight two front-runner city cases. As shown here, we could see Kuala Lumpur and Iskandar, Malaysia. These are among the cities that actually started quite early in Malaysia to go into low carbon society development. And we can see the second column is the Asia-Pacific integrated model. So we are able to come up with quantification of potential emission and its reduction and so on. Therefore, showing and communicate effectively with mayors as well as city officials potentials as well as the implications of doing some policies or not doing certain policies. And that provides us with a framework to write the policies into blueprints and action plans, which we hope through their implementation will lead us to achieving the targets that are actually mentioned to the right-hand side of the chart. So we've got 2030, 2040, and 2050. Our general approach has been to help cities to achieve low carbon society by 2030, hopefully achieving some peaking of emission of the city. And by 2040, we hope that therefore they are on a good trajectory towards being carbon neutral ready and on a smooth transition further towards net zero by 2050. And we need to acknowledge that our ability to do that, we can't do it alone, and we have got strong support as well as very close collaboration with international as well as local partners as shown here. And probably I take this opportunity to just quickly highlight at the bottom right of the first column, you would see Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. We have Meredydd Evans later on to share with us. They are the latest partner that actually we take on board, and we'll be working closely with them using the GCAM model to further assess and look into the implications as well as impacts and potentials of pursuing net zero emission for Kuala Lumpur. And apart from Japan and the US, we are also expanding our coalitions so that we now support 21 GCOM Malaysian cities, and specifically we have 8 pilot cities under GCOM And we have actually helped them to develop climate action plans that are in compliance with the Common Reporting Framework. So again, no time to go into details of these, but these are some of the products that we have actually come up with. And I think just to quickly, because we talk about partnership and coalitions, this is specifically the kind of model that we actually use. We need to have the right people and partners, multidisciplinary background, dealing with whole cities. And the interesting thing is we have policymakers on board directly, sitting within the research team. And we have to work within the institutional setup of the particular city. And then here comes the science part of it. An iterative process where we do scenario-based modeling using the AIM as mentioned earlier. And it's people-centric in that we have got focus group discussions, engaging people to actually get comments and feedback from them in terms of our proposals, which eventually goes into the policies. As in the case of Kuala Lumpur, the delivery of the Kuala Lumpur Low Carbon Society Blueprint 2030. These are then mainstreamed into the legal system, the statutory development planning system, and therefore they become planning controls which development projects need to comply with, and that actually will ensure the implementation of the policies and real actions on the ground. And for Kuala Lumpur, after we started working on the Low Carbon Society Blueprint back in 2018, 3 years into implementation, we saw the need to actually up the ambition. So for the city as the national capital of the country to lead the way towards achieving carbon neutrality. So on the right, we see again the ARM model helping us to actually chart out a pathway and a trajectory to guide the city, thinking about what kind of policies to put in place and so on. Hopefully we are able to bring carbon emission down to the 2050 level and with potential for further offsetting and so on. And to do carbon neutrality or to achieve net zero emission is not an easy thing. And we think our emphasis is on actions, on implementation. That is why we see the necessity of starting off with a pilot project. And we identify Wangsa Maju, a little urban precinct about 11 square kilometers to the northeast of the city, to be the pioneering test case for Kuala Lumpur. And based on the ARM modeling results, we identify 5 strategic sectors as shown on the slide to actually focus on, and a total of 20 projects. Without having the time to go into the details of all these, I'll probably take this opportunity to just explain to you that the action plan that we produce, since it's an action plan and action oriented, therefore, we provide actually very clear and specific guides to the city in terms of the specific location of what to do where. So what is shown here are just 2 examples. The one on the left is for the energy sector projects, the one on the right for mobility projects. So the action plan actually outlines clearly what are the things that need to be done and where. And these are just some of the projects that are actually ongoing or being put on the ground. For example, top left is actually the solar-powered street lamp, as well as the river cleaning project in Sungai Bunus within the precinct. And then the community recycling project, tree planting, as well as the introduction of electric buses for the free bus service in Kuala Lumpur. And interestingly, along the way that we prepared the action plan, Aeon, which is also a Japanese company, came to us and kind of sounded their interest in getting involved in it. And by the time, in fact, the action plan was completed, this project being shown on the left-hand side has been completed. At the Aeon Mall, in their retrofitting, they actually installed rooftop PVs as well as PVs covering their parking areas. And on the right is another example of project that we identified specifically for an LRT station. And we call it station area planning. And you will see that this actually opens up to lots of opportunities for investment, development of new projects, and so on. And the reason why we do this is to enable the surrounding development to support directly the function of the light rail transit. So hopefully we'll be able to get more people to use the transit, and even to cut down movement from the suburban area to the city center. And one key or signature project that we had with Kuala Lumpur was the Tokyo to Kuala Lumpur low carbon system, T2KLLCS, and this has been actually generously sponsored by the Ministry of Environment Japan, as well as close collaboration with IJS. And out of this, actually, we now working on Wangsamaju, we also see the need to actually expand the partnership to cover Saitama City, because Saitama City offers a very good model for us, an example for us to learn from, and the mutual learning that we can actually have. So this was shared during the high-level talks on Zero Carbon City Kuala Lumpur back in August, just last August. And here is just the evidence of the collaboration between TMG, Tokyo Metropolitan Government, IJS, Saitama City, and Kuala Lumpur, and UTM has been involved. And to celebrate the successful partnership and coalition, in fact, we are proud to announce that Tokyo and Kuala Lumpur has been jointly awarded the C40 Cities Bloomberg Philanthropist Award under the Building a Climate Movement category. And that was just actually given out a while ago in Buenos Aires. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Janard. So why I forgot to properly introduce you. So co-director UTM Low Carbon Asia Research Center. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to invite Makoto Kato, General Manager and Principal Researcher for ECC. Kato-san, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your kind introduction. My name is Makoto Kato. I'm a member of Board of Directors of the Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center, Japan. Today, I am going to walk you through our experiences from the partnership to strengthen transparency for co-innovation, which we call it, the PASTI. As the program under the Ministry of the Environment, Japan. As Watanabe-san from the MOJ already mentioned, the PASTI is one of the flagship program under the transparency pillar of the ASEAN-Japan Climate Action Agenda 2.0. So I don't really have to repeat this policy background, but we are closely working with the ASEAN Secretariat and also ASEAN member states through the ASEAN Working Group on the Climate Change. Previous speakers already mentioned, we have seen the great momentum from the ASEAN member states and also other countries, especially after the Glasgow meeting for the announcement of the, for example, Thai government and Vietnamese government, Indonesian government, their response to the climate, Glasgow Climate Pact. The carbon neutrality in 2050 or net zero emission 2065, those actually spurred for the actions not only by the national government, but also the great momentum was provided to the private sector. So now companies, in Thailand, companies in Singapore, companies in Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, they're actually their work has been extremely accelerated towards the net zero emissions. And what we are doing in this collaboration program is that at the respective ASEAN member states, we have been working on the domestic implementation and the legislation of the NDCs. And then also at the ASEAN region-wide activities, where we're promoting the mitigation and also establishing a common framework across ASEAN member states. What we are trying to focus is that we are, because the private sector's activities is very important, so that we are working on the measurement, reporting, and verification at facility levels emissions. So that. And then in the bilateral cooperations, we are very successful in some countries in helping elaboration of fundamental legal upgrading, including Vietnam's law on environmental protection. And then in the ASEAN level, we are now, tomorrow actually, we are launching for the, almost like a semi-draft of the common ASEAN guideline for the measurement and reporting at the facility level. Well, this is actually the useful guidelines for the ASEAN based companies. So that is something we are going to, we have been working through the PASTI project. And of course, Japan has some assets of experiences based on the, for example, greenhouse gas accounting and reporting system. And also we have been working closely with the private sector, especially highlighting the incentives incentives through ESG investment and finance, so that these kind of activities are brought across ASEANs through regional cooperation and bilateral individual in-country activities. Now, you see, the corporate value is, I think it's not independent from climate anymore. They are quite, especially for the companies which are closely connected with the supply chain or value chains in the global market. The investors or consumers or industry, financial industries, they're actually looking at those companies, including those in Asian countries, how much emissions of greenhouse gases are made, and then are there any great efforts towards the emissions reduction, including the compliance with TCFD or science-based target or CDP protocols. And at the national level, because currently national governments usually have very rough top-down type of data of greenhouse gases, basically from the national greenhouse gas inventories. But by introducing this kind of facility level greenhouse gas emissions measurement reporting system, they have now close access to the bottom-up type data, and then that helps the elaboration and implementation of relatively careful policies and measures that can be addressed and that can support even further emissions reduction activities by the private sectors. And for those purpose, PASTI has been working in mainstreaming transparency activities by the private sector, and also we're accelerating the institutional development. As I mentioned, we have worked with the Vietnamese government to legislation change, and also we've been working with government of Philippines or Thailand government. Working on the company level measurement and reporting in relation with, for example, like a security market or like a stock exchange, so that the listed companies are actually expected to comply with the higher standard, including for emissions reductions and also planning for net zero emissions in future. And also capacity building is very important, so that we've been also accelerating this kind of efforts. And then finally, the co-innovation part. Co-innovation here we mean, it's not for the in our case, it's not much relevant with technology itself, but we're trying to actually provide co-innovation for the mobilization of finance program from the private sector. Of course, for the ESG investment, but also companies were now working on the third scope 3 emissions. So that's something we would like to promote for not only from Japan but also across the Asia and the world. And I am trying to respond to the questions from the Madam Chair, but I would like to stop here and I would like to come back to the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I hope we do have time for further questions. So let us move on to the next speaker, the Leslie Mitchell. Yeah, and the Associate Director, Forum for the Future UK.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
If you don't mind, I will just keep my seat here for my notes. So thank you for inviting me, to Terry, to IGES, to UTM, and to the chairs for allowing Forum for the Future to just spend a few minutes presenting the work that we are doing in Southeast Asia and South Asia to unlock collaborative innovation and transformation. Forum for the Future is an international NGO with offices in Singapore, Mumbai, New York, and in London, but based all around the world. And we have spent the last 25 years working with businesses, civil society, philanthropy, international organizations to help them understand how they can accelerate action towards a more sustainable future. So I'm here speaking on behalf of our colleagues in Singapore and Mumbai. My name is Leslie Mitchell. I'm the Global Strategic Lead for Sustainable Nutrition. So not within the energy space, but talking a little bit about one of our projects as well today. And I just want to share two examples of the kinds of collaborative work that we catalyze as an NGO. The power of that work is the people who get together in those multi-stakeholder collaborations to create change. And the first one I wanted to showcase for you was the Responsible Energy Initiative. We recognize that scaling renewable energy is critical to the rapid transition to a low-carbon economy in Asia. But at the same time, we're seeing significant risks that the industry may scale in a way that does not account for environmental, social, or human rights impacts. And this is such a critical moment in the development of the sector, with renewable energy scaling rapidly and financing models shifting from public to private and emerging policy and regulatory mechanisms. So the Responsible Energy Initiative works with the renewable energy sector to adopt business models and value chains with justice, equity, universal rights, and resilient ecological systems at their core. This is a 6-year program, and we have already begun with the Responsible Energy Initiative in India, but we will move next year to working in partnership with actors across the Philippines and then into the Americas. One thing that makes the Responsible Energy Initiative embody many of the things that we have talked about here today is that it is a multi-stakeholder collaboration and very actively engages the whole renewables value chain to design solutions together. And what we try to do within that is proactively bring a much broader and more inclusive set of actors together than might pop up within perhaps a public-private partnership situation. We try and bring to that some key components. Firstly, systems thinking, enabling people to understand interrelationships and layers of change, but also applied futures to really stretch those visions of the future that could be achieved and create a holistic approach to sustainability. So the key objectives of this are to collaboratively set a vision for a responsible renewable energy sector and principles by which actors can derive outcomes that are both just and regenerative. It establishes a systemic understanding of the environmental, social, and governance risks and identifies ways to transform business models. From that, we go on as a co-created collaboration to pilot interventions and support the scaling of approaches that accelerate the responsible renewable energy sector. And I'm very pleased that the steering group of actors includes Terry as part of one of the key actors within that. So we are moving on now to a set of emerging pilots in India. One looking at multiple land use issues for energy and food security, so overlapping issues within the landscape. And secondly, a playbook for responsible investing in renewable energy. Circular innovation, guides to responsible energy development, responsible renewable energy procurement, and conflict management for renewable energy development. So the key to this are those characteristics of co-creation, where we're bringing together actors across the system, diagnosis, the shared vision, identifying the otherwise unseen consequences and mitigating for those, and really encouraging those behaviours that will shift towards those future visions and prototyping that in practice. And as one last point, I just wanted to say that renewable energy is not the only area that we work in. As I mentioned, I'm the lead for sustainable nutrition, and I've just spent the last several weeks in Singapore working with the team there, looking at the shift in the protein system, very heavily driven by alt-tech startups, and lots and lots of energy and massive multi-millions of investment into technology startups and scaling of alternative proteins. And there we have a protein challenge collaboration, which is aiming to look beyond that immediate alt-tech startup situation to say, will this transformation in the food system and in the protein sector in Asia lead to ecologically safe and socially just outcomes that deliver healthy, sustainable food for all? And in both cases, we very much welcome actors across the system to come and engage. So please do reach out for more information. But I hope that these projects show that it is possible to embody and embed the acceleration, the alignment, but in ways that are appropriate for the region and the sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Leslie. We will not agree that the complex program needs a multi-stakeholder coalition approach. So let us now move on to Meredydd Evans, the Senior Staff Scientist, PNNL, or Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Washington, D.C.
Great. Good afternoon, and thank you for your interest and your participation. I first wanted to start by thanking UTM, as well as the United States State Department for supporting our work to collaborate with UTM and other partners in Southeast Asia, as well as some of my research collaborators at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Zubar Khan, Chau. So today I'll talk about cities. Cities are incredibly important in Asia in terms of how you can transform innovation, how you actually get new technology in place. Cities are responsible for a large share of the emissions, as well as a large share of the decisions that can actually transform society. So, sorry. Right there. Oh, thank you. Okay. And we've heard throughout the day, throughout the afternoon in this panel about the importance of not just looking at that technology and innovation transfer from one sole perspective. So I think it's really important to also look at it from an integrated perspective where you're thinking about what the city needs to be able to transform, what kinds of information the city needs, how to best address the needs of different stakeholders. So we've been collaborating with UTM as well as the city of Kuala Lumpur, the city of Bangkok, in addition, on modeling and analysis to bring in multiple different sectors in a way that can answer cities' questions around key trade-offs that they may have to make. And understand what are some of the co-benefits of decarbonization. Sorry, I don't think that's me. So looking at this from a multi-sector integrated perspective can allow cities to explore different socioeconomic and environmental consequences of policies and across the entire spectrum of what the city does. We use a modeling platform called the Global Change Analysis Model, and we've developed an interesting tool to just break it out easily for a city with relatively little data. It's open source. And we think this kind of information can be critical in collaboration with local stakeholders, engaging with them on the questions they want to answer, to contribute to informed, sustainable decision-making at the city level. So what kinds of questions can this new tool called City Scale address? For example, what happens to energy prices if you adopt new policies? And in particular, if the city is alone in adopting them, or if they're adopted more broadly. What kinds of climate impacts may affect the choice of pathways and how effective they can be? Will the plan create net jobs and have positive economic impacts? And how do a lot of cities are concerned, we're growing, we want to grow, to create more opportunities for the people who live here. So if we choose decarbonization or other innovative technology pathways, what does that do for our economic development? Those are critical questions to be able to design programs, to design policies that make sense in situ, in the cities that are taking the action. So being able to look at it in a consistent way, thinking about that development and the kinds of pathways the cities want, I think is really powerful in helping inform those policies and transitions. So briefly on the Smart Cities Kuala Lumpur project, we've been partnering with support from the U.S. Department of State, with UTM, with DBKL, and other regional stakeholders, working to develop pathways for potential decarbonization. And the figure just shows the kinds of waterfall approaches in terms of what are the most impactful, how do the different sectors and elements get you all the way to net zero. And I believe this can inform city options and the implications that cities can have for national trends and national decisions, which can also in turn inspire greater ambition and greater collaboration with national stakeholders and governments. So a final slide, this approach, while we have piloted it in Kuala Lumpur, the tools we've developed are well established and are applicable elsewhere. So we've also worked in Bangkok, Thailand, and are reaching out and have worked in other places around the world at the subnational scale, in China, in Ukraine, in Canada, just to name a few. So the types of analysis this type of analysis we think can inform city leaders in long-term decision making as they sort through their climate and energy system goals. And again, cities play a really important role in decarbonization. And through meaningful stakeholder engagement and capacity development, and capacity building, we believe analysis and clear integrated approaches to helping cities understand their choices can play a truly transformational role in bringing new innovation and technology transfer. So with that, I would like to close and hope there's maybe a minute or two for the panel questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the end of this session too. So I will hand over mic to Matthias.